Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly 90-minute deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Lisa. I'm a clinical psychologist and a college counselor. I am a parent of a boy in elementary school, a girl in middle school, and a girl in college. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University.
This week in the news, how college applicants embellish essays with sob stories and fake patents. An article by Isabel Vincent of the New York Post. Our questions from a listener, how do I know which colleges we should visit? That's Shelly from California. And our interview is with the Tuitionfit.org founder, Mark Salisbury, who explains what Tuitionfit is, why he started Tuitionfit, and how it can help families. That will be part 2 of 3. And our college spotlight is Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
And once again, my brother from another mother is coming off the graveyard shift, so I just want to thank you for your service, my friend.
No problem. It wasn't a bad night.
Oh, good. Awesome. So a few announcements. Our regular listeners will remember about 6 months or so ago, I was talking quite a bit about it. We're going to be rolling out our YouTube. We're College Bound Kid YouTube. And I mentioned it was like a $7,000 investment. And if you notice, I haven't been talking about it lately. Well, what happened? Well, the company we were using, the $7,000 projection ended up being north of 10. And, we just didn't have the resources to do it. So that project is on hold right now. But I will say this, we get contacted, I don't know, twice in the last 25 days about people who want to advertise on YCBK. And we've made a commitment to be commercial free for you guys. But what I try to do is convert them to the YouTube project. You could support our YouTube project. So hopefully we'll have an update with you soon on that. What we have done, Nemanja, our sound engineer, has taken the 900 individual segments and turned them into their own audio file. So where do I get 900? Well, you think we're up to episode 213, and we used to have 5 segments. Remember the book chapter, Dave?
I sure do.
Yeah. First 171 episodes had a 5th section.
Anika remembers that real well.
Oh, remembers real well. I think I burned her out forever. No, by the way, Anika's great. We talked last week. So we've got those in the individual audio segments. We just need to convert it into all the images with, everything that goes up with the graphics and the SEO and all that. So hopefully we'll be able to come back to you sometime with an update on what's going on with YourCollegeBoundKid.com YouTube. Meanwhile, our whole entire episodes go up automatically, but that's not the value. We're talking about taking each individual segment. So if somebody just wants to hear the question, or they just want to hear in the news, or they just want to hear the interview, or they just want to hear the spotlight, it will be its own shorter audio file. That's what we're doing. Second, I just want to tease this out, and you may be hearing more about this. We were approached by an organization called bold.org, and they want to establish a special scholarship for YourCollegeBoundKid.com. And the way this would work is we would pick who the recipient of this scholarship is. We would pick their criteria. And if anybody wanted to donate to support like a gifted and talented under-resourced kid, they would get a 100% of their money would go toward supporting the kid, and they would get a tax deduction. So they basically set up tax deductions. So if somebody wants to support somebody and get a tax deduction, they can do it through their organization. And so you may be hearing more about that. Lisa and I are investigating it, doing some research, talking to some people. I know a number of people have reached in and written us and said, it'd be great if you guys could support an under-resourced kid. And so there might be some interest out there amongst our listenership, somebody who wants to invest in a kid and also wants a tax break. So at a minimum, I'll follow up with you and let you know what we've decided on this. So far, we like what we see, so we'll see where that goes. My last announcement is not a YCBK one. It's just a general one. Dave and I and Lisa and I, we've talked a lot about the test optional movement in the context of ACT and SAT. But what we haven't emphasized that much, and that's because we tend to be more focused on undergrad in our conversations, the test optional movement is spreading rapidly now. It's impacting GRE, GMAT, which business students take, LSAT, law students take, MCAT, which Dave knows all too well from his past.
Oh, yeah.
The medical school test, and then the DAT, the dental admission test. So across the country, this test optional movement is taking wave. Did you know that, Dave?
I had no idea that it was affecting the MCATs. So that is news to me. Do you know how many schools that is?
No, I have an article, and I'm trying to suss out, is that something that would be of interest to our listeners to come back and talk about that? Maybe I'll share it with you, and you and I can decide together, if you think it'd be of interest. But we haven't really talked that much about it, and so I just wanted to at least announce it. All right, admissions tip. So a lot of times, parents, you're overwhelmed by the cost of college, and you're staring a bill right in your face. Maybe it's $25,000 for the fall for your child, or whatever it is. I mean, it could be $10,000 to one person is $100,000 to somebody else. And you're like, I don't have this money. How am I going to do this? And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that schools offer payment plans. In fact, Dave, you use the payment plan at Yale, don't you? You've told me that.
Yes, it is. A monthly sum of about $8,105.
Why don't you tell us the pennies while you're at it, Dr. Lincoln Penny?
$105.57.
See, of course he knows. Of course, why am I not surprised? But one of the things that payment plans can do is they can diminish the amount of money that you need to borrow. So you may say, well, I don't have that in a lump sum. But maybe you can if you can spread it over a longer period of time. So my tip is know the payment plan options for all your schools. They do vary. Some schools will go as many as 12. Some will go up to 10. Some will go up to 8. And it's just the same amount. They automate it. There's a little setup fee, but the setup fee is usually quite negligible. It's usually like around that $50 to $75 range. So well worth it. And it can be a way that you can decrease your borrowing. So admissions tip, know all the payment plan options. Although, Dave, I have to tell you this really quick story. I will forget this. I was doing boarding school admissions. And this really obnoxious parent came through the office. In fact, actually applied with a couple of kids, be 2 to 3 years apart. And other people in the office did not want to deal with him. So they sort of had me deal with him. He wanted to meet all the big wigs in the school. Okay. And he basically was like, can I give you guys some advice? You need to kind of know who's walking through your admission doors. And you need to know how to differentiate between people that can stroke a check for the whole thing and people that need to pay on the installment plan. How arrogant is that?
That is a lot.
Yeah. So, we were not a fan. But anyway, that's a little side. It popped in my head. All right. So admissions vernacular. Dave, once again, we're now in test optional admissions vernacular. So you can pass or not. You can guess or pass. The word of the day, articulation agreement.
Articulation agreement. It's an agreement where you articulate. You have to speak really clearly with your agreement. You have to enunciate. You have to pronunciate. So when you articulate, you get an agreement that everybody understands.
I am just thinking, Freedom must say to you that you are the biggest BSer sometimes. Anyway. So articulation agreement.
You just have to learn your alliteration when you articulate.
Oh, you might get over on your patience, but you're not getting over on Frida or me with this nonsense, this poppycock, Anyway, articulation agreement is an agreement. Usually you'll see this in this context between community colleges and public schools in their area, where they have clearly stipulated which courses will count for credit. And so some states have for example, California is a great example. They have these real airtight articulation agreements. Like you go and you complete this and you automatically, you can get into the UCs and this is what you need to do. And all these credits count and you don't have to worry about you're taking a bunch of courses that the college you're transferring into won't acknowledge and won't recognize. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Don't waste your time taking Art History 101 if they want Art History 105 in order to qualify.
Yeah, and you see how far off you were with your enunciation nonsense.
Oh, I thought
you can't argue for this one.
Yeah, but it's like Eddie Murphy in Beverly Hills Cop when he says, "You're
Oh
so
boy,
full
he's
of
a
it." He
movie.
says, "Yeah, but I look good."
Of course,
Sounded good.
I've never seen the movie, but I know Eddie Murphy is, and I did see Eddie Murphy. He played in this movie where it was like this guy on the street trading places.
Oh my goodness, that's a classic.
Yeah,
With
I've seen it.
Dan Aykroyd.
Yes, I've seen it. See, so a little street cred there, a little street cred.
That's right.
All right, our
For
big number.
$1. Okay.
Our big number of the day, and I promised this last week. We were talking about the College Board. We were talking about how much they pay. That's what we did the switcheroo, Dave. So if you're not recognizing this, remember Lisa did the in the news section.
Okay.
How much David Coleman's salary is running the College Board. Now, this is his 2018 salary, and it does include his bonus, $1.8 million.
Man, I know his salary ain't test optional.
So I'll say a little something about this. So the College Board is hugely controversial within the context of admissions officers. You'll see a lot of eye rolling when it comes up. And sure, there's resources they provide, and it is a member organization. And why is that true? Well, it's a nonprofit, and nonprofit organizations or not-for-profit organizations, they're supposed to run their business for their owners. Instead of earning money for themselves and pouring money back into more money to the stakeholders, it's supposed to go back into, investing into the organization. And that's really the difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit. And a lot of people feel like the College Board does not do that anywhere near to the extent that it should. An example would be how chintzy they are when it comes to fee waivers. They pretty much want someone to be just flat out indigent or the kid doesn't have a fee waiver. So there's a lot of criticism around the College Board. Now, they'll push back and say, look at the great programs we have. We provide an amazing website like bigfuture.org, or we start a CLEP program, which you're going to be hearing more about, which is an amazing program that I will give the College Board all the credit in the world for running. And so pretty controversial. And here's just a couple articles I found. If people are more interested in exploring this, you can Google this. This is an article that came out in 2019. It says the College Board nonprofit. Oh, the money one can make. Another article, College Board nonprofit. I think not. So you can look those up if you want to read more about the controversy over the College Board. And by the way, there's another person there making over $1 million as well. And a lot of mid-level execs make $300,000 to $400,000. So sometimes you'll see them recruit away admission directors who do not get paid that much. And the College Board will snag them up and we'll be like, yeah, wanted that extra 100 or 200K. Everybody's got their prices, they say.
Well, Mark, I think part of the cynicism with colleges in general is that actually goes to a lot of universities. When people see university presidents like Chicago making $3.2 million, when they see coaches making $5 to $10 million, when they see mid-level administrators making well into the six figures, and then they see all that being passed into 7 to 8% tuition hikes for a degree in which 30% of kids may not get a job that exceeds the salaries of high school graduates. I think that all feeds into the cynicism.
No, I can't disagree with anything you said. I was looking up this week, I was reading about Michigan State. Of course, many people know Mel Tucker, our coach, gets $95 million over 10 years, the highest salaries in all of college football. And I was reading an article on Michigan State assistants get raises. And so the defensive and offensive coordinators, they're well into the mid one, like close to 1.5 million. Then I read about this other guy. He makes $1 million. I'm like, who's this guy? I've never heard of him before. I looked him up. Dave, the offensive line coach, not even the offensive coordinator. The offensive line coach makes over $1 million.
Yeah.
But it goes back to what you said when we talked before about Nick Saban. Nick Saban. Like, how much money are you bringing into the institution if you can afford to pay these people this much? And that's a little different because all that money is usually a lot of times raised by boosters and alumni. It doesn't come right out of the budget. Anyway, I'm going off.
And actually, at least there is an economic argument to be made for Division I football coaches because there is a direct translation of money they bring into the program. But I think what a lot of people have a problem with is mid-level academic administrators, provosts and deans and administrator vice presidents of X, Y, and Z making $250,000, and the fact that there's like 10 times more of them in today's university institution than there was 20 years ago.
Yeah, and we've talked about that. The biggest problem with is not necessarily the salaries, because the people that make a lot, they're usually managing huge staffs, and in the for-profit world, they'd make a lot more. The biggest criticism is what you said at the end, is the bloat or the growth of administrative positions. And that's one of the biggest things that's led to the increased cost of college, like the sheer number of administrators on payroll. That's where, that's one of the biggest reasons college costs have spiraled up. But I do want to say one last thing, in fairness. So last week when I teased out that I was going to do the big number, on David Coleman, I got a text message from one of our regular listeners, very dedicated. Said, I heard you talking about David Coleman, and this is what he said. He is one of the most brilliant people that I have ever worked with. And I will say this, I've had a chance to talk with Coleman on 2 occasions, and he has got a sentient mind, and he's always been very kind to me. So I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, but I did want to let people know that the College Board is pretty controversial, because they're also a little bit secretive in their compensation structure. And that's a lot of money to make in education, But anyway, enough about that. Dave, we've got a great article. Take it away, my friend.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
All right. Our article, How College Applicants Embellish Essays with Sob Stories and Fake Patents by Isabel Vincent. Now, the story of University of Pennsylvania student Mackenzie Fierstein, who lost a prestigious Rhodes Scholarship for allegedly faking details about her background in her application, went viral several weeks ago. Apparently, Miss Fierstein claimed she would be the first in her family to go to college in a personal essay that helped her gain admission to Penn. Now, with that story in doubt, she's lost a prestigious scholarship. In her essays to applications to Penn and Rhodes, 24-year-old Fierstein claimed that she would be the first in her family to go to college, giving her a first-generation status prized by many top colleges trying to recruit kids from poor backgrounds. But in fact, both her mother and grandfather attended college. Fierstein also made detailed claims about abuse she had suffered at the hands of her mother, which were later to be found to be in some doubt. But many experts told the Post it's not uncommon for high school students to stretch the truth on their college entrance essays to get noticed by top schools. So this article really talks about 3 big areas where kids are stretching the truth in order to get into these top colleges. The first big area isn't the whole thing about patents. Some kids are claiming on their essays that they have published a novel or memoir, when in fact their parents have hired a self-publishing outfit to produce what looks like a legitimate book. Other teens will write about meaningful volunteer work in developing countries when their moms and dads have founded the trips abroad just so they can have college essay fodder. Now, some students are even going so as far as to register their own patents for research they never completed. According to the article, there are Chinese companies that charge a few $1,000s and will do all the hard work for your child to register a scientific patent. And admissions folks are seeing a lot more of them as competition for schools becomes even more fierce and opportunities for extracurriculars dry up during COVID. And that's the problem. Right now with the Common App, there are over 1 million students applying to more than 800 colleges, and it's getting harder than ever for each school to verify every applicant's story. So the sudden influx of fraudulent student patents is one of the most worrying incidents of student accomplishment fraud included in admission packages, according to one Ivy League admissions officer. Now, whenever we see a student bragging about a patent, we're all hyper-vigilant, said the education consultant. The second big thing that kids are lying about is their ethnicity. As schools increasingly seek diversity on their campuses, white students are fibbing about their ethnicity in order to get an edge, according to a 2021 survey, which found that 34% of white students, 34%, admitted to lying about being a racial minority. Of those students, 48% admitted to lying about being Native American. Meanwhile, some legitimately underprivileged students are resist dwelling on their personal hardships and insist upon being accepted on their merits. And lastly, they are lying about overcoming obstacles. Many professionals who help students prepare the 650-word personal essay component of the Common App, an application used by more than 1 million students, say the most popular essay prompt is how students overcome obstacles in their lives. Basically, these schools are pushing kids to have trauma in their lives before 17, said one Manhattan based consultant. So the question is, why is all this happening? Well, the reason, according to this article, is as universities increasingly become standardized, as universities increasingly make standardized test scores optional in an effort to be equitable and fair, there is an even greater emphasis on the personal essay component of the college application. As one person said, the irony of going test optional is that it opens the door to more shenanigans. And in conclusion, one person, Francis Queller, who runs a tech prep service, said that in today's environment, it's almost impossible for a student to stand out. It's very difficult to be a standard student applying to colleges these days. So, with that, Mark, let me pass it on to you and say, what say you?
I'll say A plus 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 survey, man.
Yeah.
You might have worked all night, but you still got a little juice left. So I want to make 4 points quickly, and then I want you just to have you comment on any of the 4 that that stand out to you, Dave. So the first point that Dave made, he read the quote about the sudden influx of fraudulent student patents as one of the most worrying instances of student accomplished fraud, according to one Ivy League admissions officer that spoke at NACAC, the annual admission conference. This is a deep concern. And the reason for this is research shows that college admissions officers take between 6 to 15 minutes to read a file. And the schools that are taking 15 minutes are some of the wealthiest ones. So it's usually closer to 6 than to 15. In fact, the article talks about how admission officers read an essay in 30 seconds. I've sat in the file reading process. I've seen essays read in much shorter time than that. Now, mind you, they get very good at speed reading, but they're flying through these. I mean, schools getting upwards of 50,000 applications, and we now have schools getting over 100,000 applications. Even schools hiring 200 seasonal readers to make it through that. That volume is just overwhelming. There's no way in the world they can hire private investigators, to examine every, what appears to be, bold claim on the part of a student. There just is not the resources for that. So this is a fundamental flaw in the system, and it's really a problem. Now, the second point, and Dave also quoted this, it says, now whenever we see a student bragging about a patent, we're all hyper-vigilant. So this is going to sound almost the antithesis of what I said before. The antenna is up. Now, when I attended the Harvard Sika Institute for additional training in college counseling, Logan Powell, who's Dean of Enrollment at Brown, he did a workshop for about 12 of us on this topic. And this is like right after Rick Singer broke. And boy, schools were hyper vigilant, and they're trying to do things. They're like randomly auditing applications, making students sign a statement saying, if we randomly audit your application and find embellishment in your extracurriculars, we will expect us to rescind the offer. They're trying to do what they can, and the antenna is up. And one thing in admissions is you get trained. By doing something over and over and over and over and over, you get trained. This popped in my head, Dave, and it might be a bad example, but it just popped in my head. So I was watching one show that I like to watch with Anitra. It's called American Greed. It comes on CNBC. It's all these basically scam artist that scammed people for like millions and billions. And it was this, bunch of kids that started selling like fentanyl, all this, like, they were making pills out of their basement. It was really sad. They traced over 90 deaths to these pills these kids were making, but they were racking, bringing in outrageous amounts of money. And then they used this bomb sniffing dog that went through the airport line, and he was supposed to sit down if he smelled the drug. And he goes right to the suitcase and sits down, and that's how they busted these kids. So I was so impressed with the dog, but it popped in my head, like, the admissions officers develop sixth sense by doing this all the time, and they can smell a rat. And so on one hand, I'm saying it's all but impossible when you have 60, 50 minutes to read a file to have a private investigative team to check out anything that appears to be embellishment. But on the other hand, just know that antenna is raised, and it is not as easy to get over on people as you may think, because there's a very healthy degree of cynicism when they see something that just doesn't quite sound right and just feels like an embellishment. I'll never forget a conversation I had with an admission officer who was telling me about how, this student had started a charitable organization in an impoverished country. I can't remember all the details right now, but what I do remember is him telling me a lot of people in the admission office were really impressed with this student, and it just wasn't quite settling well with him. And he made a couple of calls and found out that the parents basically put $50,000 up to create a fake charity.
That's right.
So that's the second point, is the antenna is up. Now, the third point is what you brought up about the tendency. I'll read the quote. "The thing is, we see a lot of kids are digging deep for hardship," added Ron Foley, math professor who runs Foley Prep, tutoring service with several locations throughout New Jersey. "It forces kids to think that the hardship is the most interesting thing about them, and that may not be the case." I see this. I see kids come to me all the time, and they're like, "I don't have a chance. I haven't been homeless. I haven't lived out of a car. I'm screwed." And they buy into that canard that you need a tear-jerking story. So that is definitely out there on the street, that mindset. And it's actually it's really not true. In fact, my last point I want to make is this can blow up in your face. In fact, the very last part of that quote says it may not be the case. So Deanna Dixon is the director of admission at Smith College, and I often refer her when people reach out to me. In fact, Ethan Sawyer of College Ethic guy reached out to me recently. "Mark, I need an African-American admissions person to speak at blah, blah, blah." And I recommended Deanna Dixon. I often refer her. I'd love to have her on the podcast, but I've had a lot of people from Smith on. We had Deb Shaver, who was her predecessor as dean. My former student, Tara Kalinison from Smith, was on. They have an amazing person there that runs a program where adult learners come back to school, live residentially, and get great financial aid. I kind of want to have her on. And I'm having Karen Kristoff on, she's dean of admission at Colorado College now, but she just recently spent 20 years at Smith. So haven't had Deanna on because I don't want people to think, what's up with Smith? Is this like a Smith promotion here? But I hold her in really high regard. I met with her twice in 2019. I also attended a workshop she attended on essays. And one of the things, and this is one of her pet peeves in admissions, is, as she said, "I don't know who's telling all these kids out here that they need a crisis story, but they need to stop." As an admission officer, first of all, I don't want to feel beaten down after reading 25 to 30 files all day of all of these heartbreaking, tear-jerking stories. Like, you feel crushed. And secondly, it doesn't always represent people in the most favorable light. And in admissions, it's always better to leave a feeling of inspiration with your reader than pity. Evoking pity is not the best place to start. And so I'm echoing Deanna's sentiments that and in fact, Deanna's gone on to say there's certain organizations out here that are telling kids that this is what they need to do, and they're telling you the wrong thing. Those are the 4 points I wanted to make, Dave. Any feedback you want to make on either one of them?
Well, I think this article comes back to what you've often talked about, and it's one word, and it's one word I think kids have to inculcate and their parents from an early age, and that is authenticity. At the bottom line, you need to be who you are. You need to develop what you what matters to you, what you're passionate about. And because you are unique, ultimately, if you focus on your authentic self, whatever you represent eventually is going to be unique and that will shine through. The problem is that so many people are trying to find the magic solution, the way to game the system, the guarantee of what's the flavor of the year that'll get people in. It just doesn't work that way. Now, being authentic doesn't guarantee that you're going to get into any one particular college. Nothing does. But it will guarantee that wherever you end up in, you will be happy and you will be fulfilled. So, once again, this to me speaks to the purpose of really preaching authenticity in everything we do.
Yeah, and one of the things I like to say to students, like to use an example, in order to go on a date, would you want to have plastic surgery to make the person think you're beautiful?
Right.
I don't think so. So, do you really want to try to pretend you're somebody completely different than who you are in order to try to get in? Normally, it will blow up in your face. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, and this article admits it, sometimes stuff gets through the cracks and sometimes it works, just like the faking of race stuff, which is part of the problem, because as long as people feel like I have a better chance with embellishment than I do with my own vanilla story, there's always going to be some people that are going to succumb to that. But I encourage you to just to do what Dave said. Don't take the bait. At the end of the day, it's hard to put a price on a clear conscience, and what it feels good to know that you authentically got in for who you were, not because you purported to be somebody different than who you are.
Right.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Lisa,
Hello.
how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited. I'm pretty fired up about what we're going to talk about today. But before we get into that, I'm excited to announce that hopefully everybody who has signed up for YCBK Plus, you should have received your first email in your inbox. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Lisa, why don't you just briefly say what YCBK Plus is and talk about what they can expect to receive?
Sure. Well, YCBK Plus is sort of like a quarterly written deep dive into different topics about college admissions. So this episode of YCBK Plus I wrote, and it's about how to conquer your test taking anxiety or performance anxiety. So it's got some explanations of theoretical underpinnings of how anxiety works, plus some really practical suggestions of how you can structure your test prep and, make sure that you're feeling calm while you're taking the test.
Awesome. And it's once a quarter we're doing this. And those of you who are very attentive may say, wait, I thought you guys are going to release it at the end of March. Well, we thought to ourselves, snap, we can send it to those who've already signed up now at the start of the month. And anybody who signs up during the month of March, we'll just send it out at the first Thursday of every month to anybody new who came on. So we decided to release it. So if you've signed up and for some reason you didn't get it, shoot us an email, but be sure to check your junk or spam, because a lot of times the first time it ends up in junk or spam.
But I hate for my article to end up in junk or spam. I worked hard on that.
Well, it's very, very good. You're not going to be disappointed, friends. Trust me. And you guys know I don't say stuff I don't believe. So this is really, really, it's funny. I've been working with Lisa for a while, and I didn't know how talented she was as a writer. I guess I should have known that.
We're always talking, right? Yes. We never write. We just talk.
True. I guess I should expect that from a Chicago grad. I know. But it's really good, friends. Check it out.
That's very nice. Yeah. No, this was so easy to write because the topic kind of just wrote itself. Not all things are so easy to write as that article was.
Yeah. And boy, I'm trying to remember how people even sign up, do so many things. I know you can just go to your College Bound Kid and it'll pop up on the screen. Do we have a drop down? Don't we have a drop down?
It's a sidebar, right?
Oh, yeah. There's a sidebar.
And there's a pop-up, yes, and a sidebar.
There's both. So if you go to yourcollegeboundkid.com on the right side and kind of like pinkish light red, you can't miss it. There's a sign-up sheet. And if you stay on the website for 60 seconds, you'll get a pop-up. I can't stand those annoying pop-ups. As soon as I get 5 seconds, they blitz me. So We made sure make sure that you at least wanted to be on the website for 60 seconds. But that's enough of that. I'm really excited about this question that we have for the day. Take it away, Lisa.
Right. Well, this question comes from Shelly from California, and she asks, how do I know which colleges we should visit?
And I'll tell you something. This is like such a super important question. And it's actually the first time we're in year 5 now that this question has been sent in. And it's important for a lot of reasons. It's important because visits do something that is very valuable for all of us. They take our time and our money. And both of those things are extremely important. So money, hotel, airfare, rent-a-car, meals. So you want to put a lot of thought into it. And then time, time's the most precious thing that we have. So the first thing that I would like to say is, what's the age of the student and where are they in the process? So if it's somebody 8th through 10th grade, let's just talk about this person first of all. So before they spend a lot of money on hotel, airfare, rent-a-car, meals, I believe in visiting a wide range of different schools within 2 hours of your home. You'll have no hotel, airfare, rent-a-car, just some meals, and hotel if you want to stay around the surrounding area. But that's a lot better than hotel, airfare, rent-a-car, meals. And so just this week, I'm meeting with a 10th grader in New Jersey, and I started asking a whole bunch of questions with them. Just started recently working with them. And, a lot of the answers were, I'm not sure. And I'm like, we got to get you on some campuses. So my job this week is to give them a list of schools to visit, and they can report back. And I'm really excited about it. So where do you visit? So I'll just throw out a bunch of things to consider, and not every one of these will always be appropriate. But these are some types of schools that you should be thinking about. So one would be a single gender school, particularly for women, because there's only 3 men's colleges. But for women, ladies, I'd like to see you set foot on a single gender. And even if you think you wouldn't want to do it, it's still a good experience. Now, let me also give a caveat. If you live out in the boonies in the hinterlands, you may not be able to get all these different things within a couple hours. And so maybe it'll take you a little bit longer. Maybe you can't do all of them. I'm kind of painting an ideal scenario, and the ideal doesn't always perfectly flow together. And I'm aware of that. So I'd love to see you visit a big city school, a small city school, a suburban school, a college town, or a more remote school. Ideally, one that kind of bleeds into the city and one that's got more well-defined boundaries. A mid-sized school and a small residential school. If you're interested in the arts at all or technology, an art school or a tech school. If you're considering a 2-year school, visit a 2-year school. If you're a person of color, African-American, I'd recommend an HBCU or an HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution. I recommend a prep school that's like more preppy, and then one that's more crunchy granola. I recommend a school that's quite diverse in all ways, and one that's more homogenous. A school that's like almost all residential and commuter. Small campus, large campus. School with lots of nature, mountains, lakes, things like that. Versus a busier school. So like a quiet versus busy. Slow pace versus fast pace. More driven school where kids are really ambitious versus like more laid back. Now, you said you just gave me 25 schools to visit. So a lot of those categories kind of overlap, and it's not like they're all distinct different schools. And so you'll find like I rattled off a lot of things, and one school might meet 4 or 5 of those criteria. But one thing that I'll say is, particularly like for the 8th or 9th graders, because as I said, 8th through 10th, the kid needs to be invested. Don't force it on them if they don't want to do it. So that's going to come at different times for different people. When I worked with Anika's daughter, Janaea, she went through a whole 10-hour college admissions video series I put together, and she could not get enough of that stuff. She did this when she was in the 6th grade. So I've been saying 8th through 10th grade. But some middle school kids who are zealous can do this before the 8th grade. And it can really center them and motivate them, kind of like dangling of the carrot in front of them so they can see all the possibilities. And then I'll have another 12th grader that wouldn't even want to watch it for 30 minutes. So you sort of have to listen to your kid and see what they want to do to find sort of the appropriate age to as to when you should start it. And the other thing I want to say is, parents, I strongly recommend, if you're going on a college visit for an older sibling, have the younger siblings come along. One thing that I've really noticed is when I work with second or third kids that have visited schools with an older sibling, they're just more advanced. They're more sophisticated. They come in already knowing more of what they want because they've been able to set foot on different campuses. And then the last thing I'll say, and this is just sort of, I'm breaking this down to kind of like the 8th, 9th, 10th who's not really sure versus somebody who's a little bit more sure, which I'll get to in a second. Take notes and reflect on your visit. That's really important. Journal, if journaling's your thing. You know, I'm not as big of a writer like that. So what I like to do is I used to like just speak into like expensive voice recorder, but now I find like the iPhone's got this really cool voice memos thing. It's pretty decent sound. I just push voice memos and record my reflections at the end of the visit because I don't care how good you think your memory is. Like, it's not as good as you probably think. And things will start to get mumbo jumbled and you won't, remember everything. And so that's kind of the initial phase that I like to do. And it's incredibly valuable. I'll share one last thing and then I'll get Lisa's thoughts on what I've said so far. So, working with a student earlier in the year, and this is not a younger student. This student is a senior now. I started working with them about a year ago. And we were just about to really kick things off, and I was really going to start working on building a college list. And then the mom said to me, she's like, Mark, we've got these 6 visits coming up. Should we, work on the college list now, or do you want to do it after? I'm like, after the visits, please, please, please. I said, I want to know everything you liked and didn't like about every school. So whoever you're working with, if it's a school counselor or if it's a parent or if you're doing it yourself or if you've got outside help, whoever it is, it's going to be very, very helpful to them if you can tell them what you like and what you don't like about any school that you visit. So just want to hear anything you want to say about anything, Lisa.
Well, I think that's really great advice. There's so much you can do virtually now, but I don't think college visits it's not as effective as being there on the campus with the people, sort of seeing it all, in the big picture. So I think it's great for kids to go or as early as, they can, as much as their family can, just to take them to different kinds of schools so they can start seeing how they respond, how they react to it. And I've just seen like with my kids, so all 3 of them sometimes would go on Lily's college visits and they would have 3 different opinions of the school.
They're different people.
They're all different people. Thomas is very impressed by anything that's near an ocean. He thinks, that's his future. Sonia's not a fan of the big city. And of course, Lily likes, all the excitement that she can possibly find. So they're looking for very different things, but you can really tell that when you're doing these visits. So I just think it's good. Like if you're on a trip, if your family is going on vacation to a different city or to visit relatives, if you can take a morning and find a college there that looks sort of interesting and schedule a tour, it's a great way just to fit that in over time as well.
Actually, I'm really, really glad you brought that up. You brought up 2 things that I didn't say that are really important. I'm a huge proponent of the virtual visit. And so I'm not saying not to do that.
No, you should do those.
Yeah, you should do those. But what I find is in-person visits help to really discern feel, and they help clarify sort of what you're looking for in a campus. So, I take students through all these exercises, and Lisa knows them because she does the same thing. Where we ask questions like, do you want a school under 5,000, 5 to 12, 12 to 25, 25 and above, and all these different things that we ask about the campus and the culture. I mean, it's very detailed. But what happens, I find, is that if you're just ruminating like in a room and trying to figure that out, it's nowhere near as effective as if you've set foot on actual campuses. Like, that's where you really get a sense. So it's worth doing if you can't visit, but there's nothing that clarifies it more than actual setting foot on campus. And the other thing that Lisa said that's extremely important that I never said is take advantage of places where you're already going to be. Like she said, visiting a relative. Exactly. You're visiting a relative, even if you're taking a trip for vacation. Once again, this has to be something the student wants to do. I'm not trying to turn your whole vacation here into like college central here, but visiting a relative, visiting a friend out of state, grandma. I mean, yeah, that gives you access to another level of schools that's not even just in your immediate proximity. So,
Exactly.
so that was a
I
great
have
point.
a friend, and she took her daughter to visit her mom, and the mom lives in Virginia, and the mom is an alumni of like Mary Washington. So they all went to see it, and the student didn't think she was going to like it all, ended up loving it, and maybe that's where she's going to go, So, I mean, sometimes I guess grandma really does know best. And, but, that she wouldn't have gone to see that school, wouldn't have been on her list had she not happened to be in the area.
And you just reminded me of another really good point. So a lot of times, and I get this both ways. I get students saying to me, can you try to convince my parent of XYZ? I get parents saying, can you try to convince my child of XYZ when it comes to schools? Let's say it's, I want to go to a bigger school or a smaller school. I want to go like this far away from home or whatever. There's so many different things. And my answer is always the same. And that is, I'm not going to try to convince them that you should go, but I will try to convince to visit with an open mind. And that's the thing that I would say with this too, is like going with an open mind.
Right.
Don't go in prejudging, because a lot of times people will do that, especially if I say single gender and someone's like, no, I don't want to go to single. Just at a minimum, it'll be an educational field trip. You'll learn some things that will broaden you as a person. So that's the exploratory phase. That's extremely helpful. And these are things I like to do with 9th and 10th graders and middle schoolers who are like really into this thing and they love to get started. So now let's talk about the next phase. So now we've got somebody, they're past that phase. Maybe they're in 11th grade now or 12th grade, and they want to know, okay, there's limited time or limited resources, time or money. And by the way, I find one of those two gets almost everybody. This is why I like to start the list building and this process at the end of 10th. I mean, if you start this process in May of 10th and you're looking at having all your applications done by the end of August, that's 15 months. If you're looking at like out of state schools, you have a lot to do in a short, in that period of time. But I know people start at all different times. Most people tend to start, more toward November to February of the 11th grade year. I find that's the most common time people start. So wherever it is, all of this works in no matter what it is. But let's say you kind of like pass that exploratory phase and you just want to know, what are the priorities? Well, the first thing that I would say is you do not have to visit every one of your schools. Like, you don't have to do that. And so you certainly can take the position of, I'll see like where I get in and see who gives me money, if money's a factor in your process. And then I'll decide based on if I get in or if the finances work where I want to visit. Like, that certainly is nothing wrong with that. And in most cases, that's what most people are going to end up doing for some of their schools. Like, it's a small number of people that gets to every one of their schools. So don't feel bad if that's the case for you, that you just can't get to all of them. Now, there are advantages, however, if you can get to as many schools as possible. And what are some of those advantages? Well, there's quite a few of them. One, it helps you to really get to understand the school so much more if you can visit there. You can confirm if you really are interested. It can help you to produce better applications because you understand the culture more, and it certainly helps with demonstrated interest. So those are some of the advantages if you can visit ahead of time. Now, what are the criteria that I think are priorities for determining where you should visit? So there are about 5 things that I would emphasize as to determine if a school is a priority. And the first is it a priority school? Is it one of the top schools on your list? If it's one of the top schools on your list, it's important because you may in your mind kind of be thinking about going there and seeing yourself there. And you want to get that reconciled one way or another, because you're totally thinking on going to that school possibly. And if you go later in the process and it's completely different than what you thought, it can kind of be like a rug getting pulled out from under you. So one of the things that I would say is prioritize schools that are at the very top of your list from an interest standpoint, but also from a realistic standpoint. Like, I'm not talking about a far reach or a high unlikely or like a school that your chances are so slim. But if by some reason you got in, it would make it your number one. I'm talking about like realistic priorities. Does that make sense, Lisa?
Absolutely. I mean, you don't want to like waste your time on something where you have like a very small chance of getting admitted. That's one you might visit if you happen to get admitted afterwards. But those target schools, the ones that you're the most interested in, I think that's where you put your money and your time.
Exactly. So that's the first thing. Where is it way up on my priority list, and is it a realistic option? The second thing is it a school that I would be open to early, applying early decision to, and do they offer early decision? Because as we know, early decision, early application, early deadline, but it's binding, meaning you have to go, right? You got to sign something. Your parents has to sign something. The counselor has to sign something. And you want to really check it out. I'm not a fan of just showing up sight unseen. I realize a lot of Questbridge kids end up doing that, and it oftentimes works out because college is what you make of it, but it's not ideal. If you're going to commit to something, you really should want to know it as much as possible. So if it's a school that you would at all consider as an early decision school and it offers early decision, that would be the second category that I would make as a priority. The third thing that I would see as a priority would be, and I always do this when I'm working with the family on this, multiple schools in the same area, like clusters. So you can get multiple bangs for your buck. It kind of reminds me as a recruiter. So I used to, when I was on the road doing admissions, traveling in fall season, you live out of a suitcase, you're on the road for a long period of time. You might go for 12 days, come back for a day or two, then shoot back out for another 2 week kind of thing. So you always want it to be maximally effective on your visits. Like, you don't want to just fly into San Francisco, which I did once, and just go to a fair and have really bad response and then come back. Like, that's once again, hotel, airfare, rent-a-car, meals, your time, that's a lot. So what you do when you're a recruiter, you want a multi-pronged approach. So what does that mean? Can I go to multiple fairs? So, like, for example, there's a week here in Atlanta that almost everybody comes, because one thing that's smart is that Atlanta has coordinated everything. There's 2 huge fairs in the Atlanta area at 2 huge private schools. And then there's another, really, really big fair at the Darlington School, another big one in Savannah. And everybody knows that's like Georgia Week. So you want to see, are there multiple fairs that I can hit? Then you want to do your high school visits that you're visiting your schools. You want to do your receptions, whether you're doing like a reception with an alumni or current family, or you're doing something like at a Marriott. You may want to meet with a group of educational consultants in the area. You want to have all of those things tied together. Maybe you're meeting with some alumni in the area, interviews, setting up like whatever your school structure is. You want a multi-pronged approach, because if one of them doesn't work out, then you get multiple bangs for your buck. That's the same thing I'm talking about here. So you want to look and say, oh, wow, there's like, these 2 schools are like 20 minutes away. We can visit 2 in one day. And look, there's another one here that's only like 90-minute drive. We could get like 3 really good visits in. Like, you want to look for that. That's a huge factor that I would say that you should prioritize when you're looking at schools. So looking for clusters. And then the fourth thing is close to home, convenient. All right. So if you've got some schools and it's going to be a pretty convenient, maybe it's a little day trip and it's not going to be as taxing, you work everything out with hotel and airfare, then yeah, that's a priority. And then the last thing would be, does the school use demonstrated interest in their evaluation? Mm-hmm. And well, you're like, well, how do you know? Well, I'm not going to go too much into that because that's my big YCBK plus coming up. But I got to tease you guys a little bit. You know how this works. But at the same time, I'll mention a few things. You can get some information in Common Data Set, which is also pre-populated in places like College Data and Big Future that they just take right out of that. You can also just flat out ask them. Admission office has demonstrated interest used at all in the admission process. Or here's a really good question. If I attend an event, virtual or in person, do admission officers get to see a record of what I've attended at all? And what you're going to find more often than not is, for public schools, it doesn't happen that often. For private schools, it's extremely common.
Right.
I'll never forget a conversation I had with a dean of admission, someone I've known for 19 years. And she's like, Mark, it's almost eerie what we can know about a student. It's almost creepy. She's like, sometimes I feel guilty, but literally all I have to do is just click a button through Slate software and I can see a track record of everything. And so that's a great question. Like, does an admission officer see the track record of visits, both virtual or in person, when they're reading an application? That's a really good insight into whether or not a school is using demonstrated interest. So those are my 5 things. Just quickly to say them again. Does the school use demonstrated interest at all? Is it convenient or close to home? Can you get multiple visits in on one trip? So the chance to do clusters. Are you considering early decision? And are there schools on your list that offer early decision? That could be ED1 or ED2. And then first or last, however you want to put it, is it a priority school on your list? Thoughts, Lisa? Anything I said that you want to comment on or anything else you want to say?
I think those are all great points. And I would just tell parents, it's really kind of a logistically challenging task to try to fit these visits in because some of them are on the weekends. Some of the places don't have them on the weekends. Some places don't have them on Mondays. So you have to have a lead time on it. You have to really think about it and be creative. And it's definitely an art, I think, to planning college visits and trying to fit them all in. But I think it's highly worth it. I had a Scholar Match student and her family scraped enough money together to go from Wyoming to upstate New York, where she was really interested in going to school, and they visited a bunch of schools, and it really did change her priorities in terms of where she wanted to go. And she ended up selecting a school for ED that I think was kind of on her radar, but she didn't realize how much she loved it until she got there. So it's just, if you can do it, it's really important to do.
Yeah, and this is why I'm a big believer in starting this process at the end of 10th, because time just flies on you. Like, first of all, most people take a while to even figure out what schools they're even interested in by the time you do that research. Then you have conflicts. Like, maybe you think, well, the summer's great, but I'm gonna wait this camp for 6 weeks. So, or my athletic schedule blows these days out. Then you don't really want to miss a lot of school, and you're trying to juggle your school calendar with your parents' availability, with the school's availability. And Lisa's point is right. It takes a lot of organization and coordination. And one of the most common things that I hear when I work with a second child from a family is I've learned now to start this process earlier. They learn that because all this is just visiting. We haven't even talked about things like the test prep part of the process, the essay writing. I was talking to a family I'm working with in Pennsylvania yesterday, and she's like, my son wrote 24 essays.
Oh, yeah. It's very easy to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And, by the time you have all these essays for schools, and then sometimes it's scholarship essays on top of it, depending on if you're going for the money. And so this stuff takes a lot of time. And so, I'm really a huge advocate. Use that summer of your rising 11th grade year, because you can get a lot done over that. And if you're like hearing this now and you're in 11th, you still have time, but just get off this night and start now. That's all. I'm always, Lisa knows this, but I'm always trying to make the senior year less stressful.
Yeah.
Because I've had people that waited super late, and literally it's like adding 2 more classes to your senior load. And that's just beyond stressful. And so it's not like the people that start late won't end up at some college, but you'll be unduly putting yourself through a level of stress that you just don't need to put yourself through.
Right. There was a kid that Lily was friends with in high school, and somehow he didn't understand that if you didn't apply early action to the University of Illinois, you were not going to get in, and so he didn't. And then, then he started panicking, and he's fine. He's great. He ended up at Indiana University, and it all worked out. But that was a very stressed out young man for a couple of months. So you don't want to do that if you can avoid it.
Yeah. And last thing, visits, they should be fun. Like, one of my best memories ever is 10 years ago when Karis and I took our big California trip. It was so awesome that we're doing a 10-year reunion. She took that, right? The same. I did this. I eat my own cooking. So the same thing I tell you to do, I do with my kids. So it was May of her sophomore year when we kicked all this stuff off. That's the time that, we started doing these trips. And like, it was really fun. And like, these can be memories that your kids will have forever, long after, you and I are not on this planet anymore.
That's true. Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't start with Lily until probably mid junior year. And I was cramming in visits like wherever I could. I had a Southwest Companion Pass that year. And man, I got my money's worth out of that. She and I were every weekend, we're flying all over the country, going to different places. And it was a lot of fun, but it was stressful. So I plan on doing a little bit earlier with my next kid.
You learn.
Yeah.
But you also, you also have fairly flexible working conditions.
Right.
Right.
No, it wasn't so much my schedule as her schedule. The musical, the play, the concerts, the games. I mean, it's working around that.
Yeah.
It's hard.
No, exactly. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Shelly. This was an amazing question. Hopefully it helped people out there. I know we come back to the visit a lot, but it's kind of important.
It's very important and fun.
Oh, by the way, I'm really excited about the next 2 weeks because I'm going to be doing a part 1 and part 2. I've been chomping at the bit to do it. And it's really things I think that would surprise you if you were to all of a sudden become an admission officer. It's going to be a lot of things that you've heard us talk about. But even still, as much as we've talked about them, I think you'd still be surprised. And so I got about 40. You know me, Lisa. You give me 6 to 8 weeks. It's dangerous.
End up being a 3-parter. I'm telling you.
I
already feel this. Maybe even be a 4-parter.
You're probably right. But I'm just going to try to introduce them and just get Lisa's quick comments. And so make sure you tune in for that because every 5 weeks I do my bonus content and then Lisa does her 5. And this one's kind of got me excited. So I'll see you next week.
Great. Thank you.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
All right, friends, hopefully you enjoyed the first part of my interview with Mark Salisbury. In part 2 of 3, Mark talks about how he gets these 8 awards, how he convinces students, parents, and counselors to submit their 8 awards to Tuitionfit. Mark talks about the 2 core principles that Tuitionfit was founded on. He talks about the mechanics of how an interested student or parent creates an account. He talks about how Tuitionfit safeguards for authenticity, what Dave and I were just talking about, and privacy. And he shares what a parent gets in return for sharing their student awards with Tuitionfit. Listen and enjoy. Let's talk a little bit more about how you gather these. How do you get them? Because I could see that being a real challenge for a lot of reasons. One, convincing people that you're not going to air their very personal information on the street or on the internet. So there might be some causes for concern about, is it really confidential? And then secondly, just your whole crowdsourcing system is going to be as good as the data that you can collect. So you're going to want to amass, thousands and thousands of these. And so what's the strategy to get people to input them, upload them? Is that happening by individuals directly? Is it happening by counselors? Talk to us a little bit about how you gather them and how you convince people to get them and get them in mass.
Yeah, that's a hill that I didn't realize when I started this would be quite so steep.
I love your transparency.
No, you spend 25 years working in colleges and universities, and then it is really hard to get higher education institutions to change. They just get stuck in their ways. They just don't have another way to do things. And many colleges know that the sticker price is repelling far more students than it's attracting. But they can't shift the way that they do things. They just get too worried about whether that might do something that they don't see coming. And so then it's just too easy to stick with doing it the same way as they've done it before. So colleges weren't going to ever share this data with us. But we were able to start by getting folks in a couple of different parts of the country, on the East Coast and the West Coast, just to find our data set, find what we were doing, and start sharing information. And these were all folks that were coming from reasonably affluent neighborhoods or reasonably affluent parts of the country in terms of their salaries, but they were also in parts of the country that had a really high cost of living. And so cost of living doesn't get accounted for when you do a FAFSA, right, or EFC. So
Sure.
somebody looks like they've got a $250,000 family income, and that doesn't do you much in the Bay Area, right, or
Uh-huh.
up in northern New Jersey. And so these were families that were in that exact
Especially with
spot
multiple
that,
kids.
right, so many people are in, where they think they're supposed to be able to spend a bunch of money on college, but when they get down to it, they really don't have the money to just write a check, and yet they're really trying to send their student to a school that has some meaning to them or that they've fallen for in some other way. And so everybody's operating in their own little space. And when people started to share data, they started to see, I thought about applying to that school 2 counties over, but just didn't. There wasn't any good reason why I didn't. I just didn't. And now I'm finding out that that school is in the price range that I really needed, while the schools that I submitted applications to are $10,000 more than I want to spend. And you know what? That school down the road is still taking applications. This is really helpful. So it started with people just finding our data set and finding this project thus through word of mouth. Then Jeff Salingo wrote about us in his book, Who Gets In and Why? And then Ron Lieber wrote about us in a column. He's a New York Times columnist that you probably know. And then his book, The Price You Pay for College. And from those really fortunate mentions, the word has just continued to spread. So we started to get more and more folks joining this project. Then it really started to take off when organizations that are focused on really helping families through the college search process, and especially organizations that are helping students find college options that they can afford. They may not all be the sort of classic college access organization, but in that sort of philanthropic range. They were starting to realize that, we're not really succeeding if our students don't graduate from college. We're sending them. That's great. But if they don't graduate, we kind of have dropped the ball here. So they began to see that sharing data and collaborating with each other really could help their efforts and help them help students, all of their students, find schools that would fit their financial range. One example of that was really meant a lot to me was one organization in the Chicago area they would send a lot of students to a particular neighboring state's flagship. And if that student was a 0 EFC, and these were all students with pretty high GPAs, if the student was a 0 EFC, that school gave that student a wonderful financial aid package, and that student really didn't have to pay much of anything to go to school there, or after borrowing a little bit and working a summer job, that student would be okay. But if that student had a $100 EFC, just a $100 EFC, suddenly that student's offer left them with a $10,000 gap. And this organization, they just didn't know. They had no real way of knowing that those differences would exist and that they would be so stark. And of course, the implications for the individual students are massive.
Sure.
So when we were able to pull all that data together and start to show them, for these students, this set of institutions is a wonderful option because if you get in, the price tag is going to fit their range. But let's take that student with $100 to $1,000 EFC. I mean, their real world existence is not demonstrably different than a 0 EFC. But that institution had made a choice about how they award financial aid. So because we had this data, we could now show that organization for those students, because you really want them to be able to afford college and then graduate, here's a different set of schools that fit those students' financial need. And this is information that just would never have been available without crowdsourcing the data set.
You mentioned two of our favorite books here on the podcast, the Lingo book and Lieber's book. And I noticed Lieber's been like a bull in the china shop lately. He's been going after schools, like demanding more transparency. And, I'm noticing a little trend I'm sure you're aware of, because you have College of Worcester and Whitman and some others now that are coming out and guaranteeing and Whitman even going so far as to use the language guaranteeing and doing a full tax review before people even apply. I mean, there's few and far out there before. I mean, F&M's been doing that for a while for early decision applicants, but I've identified this as a trend in its early stage, and I think it's partly because of the work you're doing behind under the surface, and then others like Lieber and Salingo that are saying they're catching the vision for the fact that we can actually change this system of finding out what you pay after you're in, and I think for so long, it was just the mountain that was just too high to climb was Mount Everest. I'm sitting here, I'm 50 pounds overweight. I'm looking at Mount Everest. I'm not getting up that thing. So I'm just going to have to,
we're going to stay down at base camp.
Yeah. And so I think that was just the fatalist mindset.
Yeah.
I think what you're doing is a whole new paradigm shift and letting people know, wow, we can take this behemoth on. But I want to go back to my question of how you actually get people to give you their aid awards so that the crowd sourcing, it has legitimacy because there's enough of a critical mass that, I mean, if somebody goes into a database and sees 2 aid awards, doesn't really tell them much, right? The data gets more and more and more compelling the more aid awards you get. So As you said, you knew you didn't realize just quite how challenging it was going to be. And I'm sure it helps when you have some of these leaders in higher ed that are touting you in New York Times and books and things like that, gives you a level of stature that probably brings a lot of people out of the closet to learn who you are and what you're doing. But talk to us about the mechanics of actually getting that. I mean,
sure.
And even put it in terms of our listeners, like if we have some of our listeners and they're thinking, I'd like to participate in a project like this, how would they do it?
Sure. Well, there were 2 things right out of the gate that we made as sort of our core values that we were not going to violate. One is Tuitionfit has to be a free exchange. It has to be a cooperative. It has to be that if a student is willing to share their financial aid offer letters to us, then they get free access to see all of the comparison data. So that has been something that we did from the very beginning, and we continue to do, and it'll always be a part of the Tuitionfit model. It's a cooperative. So families share information, they get to see information. That's a free exchange. The second thing was we will never, ever, ever sell leads. We will never be a lead generation tool. We're never going to sell anybody's personal information to organizations that could then bomb them with mail. In my opinion, that's one of the things that's really hurt the college admissions process is the amount of mail that students get and the amount of brochures that all look the same, and they're just overwhelming. And it produces this choice overload problem where you just don't want to look at any of them because they all are too much. So what we did was we said, all right, and this is how the public can use Tuitionfit, especially if you've got award letters to share. You want to see what's out there. You just want to have some comparison information. You go to Tuitionfit, you create an account. It's maybe 30 seconds just to provide some basic information, demographic stuff, the high school you're at, those kinds of things. And then you just take a picture of your financial aid offer letter, not the scholarship award, not just the acceptance letter, but the financial aid award offer that is sometimes the shopping sheet. People call it the shopping sheet, or a template like that. Usually you can download it from the portal if your school does a online admissions process. You just take a picture of it with your phone, or you upload the PDF, or you scan it with your computer, and we take care of the rest. The first thing that we do is we just make sure that it's real and it's from the school that you think it's from. We probably need a rule that says that there can't be any more Dominicans in higher education across the country. There can't be any more St. John's or Loyolas. There's oftentimes folks will upload an award letter from Loyola Chicago, and they'll say, oh, it's at Loyola Maryland, because they just were typing fast, right? And because we were going to show this data to others and people are going to see it, it's really important that we verify that the information is right. We verify that this is an award letter that went to somebody with this kind of EFC, because data integrity really matters. So that's the first thing that we do. Then the second thing we do is we block out all of the personal information that's on that letter. Your name, address, phone number, social security number, temporary ID number, and any kind of named scholarship that might be on that letter. Let's say that you received the Mark Salisbury scholarship, and I could Google Mark Salisbury scholarship at the university and see that that's a scholarship specifically for African-American men from Atlanta that want to be in teaching. Well, that's going to start to dig at anonymity, right? So we're going to block out the Mark Salisbury name of that scholarship. And then we show you the redacted version of that scholarship so that you get to say, you know what, I'm good with that. I see it is anonymized. Or, you know what, this award letter happens to have a plus loan in there and it's got a number that I think suggests something about my income. Can you block that number out? Yep, no problem. Because ultimately this has to be something that it's a trust exercise and we have to earn your trust. So you as a user get some say in what gets redacted. Then we calculate the price tag and we throw out the plus loans. We throw out work study. We throw out everything that's not real money. And we also note any awards that are 1 year only. And we put that all together so that we can show you, here's the price tag you're going to see on the bill if you were to choose to go to this school. So that's the process of how that works. And there's probably some technology that could do that real fast and make a lot of mistakes. Certainly we could have done this by saying, hey, everybody, just look at your award letter and just write a number in. I've seen some of the folks that do that, and the number of errors in that data set is troubling, to say the least. So we did it this way so that people could verify. And if we got our math wrong, you can tell us and we'll own it, fix it. But that's the process of how it works. And so we actually process every letter individually so that we know what we've got and we know that we've redacted it right and we've taken good care of what folks have shared with us.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Our recommended resource for episode 214 is the outstanding reference book, Colleges Worth Your Money. And the subtitle is A Guide to What America's Top Colleges Can Do for You. There are three authors, Andrew Belasco, Dave Bergman, and Michael Trivette. Friends, I'll be honest, I'm embarrassed it took me until year 5 to recommend this book. This book is a reference book that has statistics galore, plus more, on what the authors regard as 175 colleges that are worth your money. Now, you may be thinking, stats, can't I just get that on the web? Well, this book contains an assemblage of data I've never seen all in one place. So here are some examples, and I'm actually looking at my book right here. I'm looking at the Virginia Tech section, which is one of the 175 schools they include. So you have admit rates by gender, admit rates for early action and early decision, percentage of students admitted by ED, 5-year admissions trends, yield percentage, transfer admission acceptance rate, which, by the way, varies considerably from one school to another. Sometimes it's much harder to get in as a transfer. Sometimes it's much easier. So this information is invaluable. Test score data, percentage of kids in the top of their class, what factors are considered by the admission office when making decisions, detailed enrollment information, class size information, top programs and majors. You want to know the top programs and majors at each school? It's here. Graduation retention rate, how much curriculum flexibility each school has, which is nice. Cost of attendance, percentage need met, percentage of students that get merit aid with and without having a need. That's important. Student debt and borrowing information. This is always cool. What are the main companies that recruit on each campus? what are the most popular internships, what are the top industries and the top employers, where do alumni work, and they have a really cool career section. And I love the career services section. So here you have stuff like how many people work in the career center. And what's actually even more important than that is the ratio. It's like endowment. You have to look at it per student. So it gives you the ratio of staff in the career center to students, and it lets you know how that compares to other schools in the 175 schools they feel are worth your money. What percentage of jobs were generated by the career center? That's pretty interesting. What percentage of students get paid internships? Then they have median income from both pay scale and college scorecard, both early career and mid-career data. They have college rankings, which you know how I feel about that, but they have them from 4 sources. So I like it. If you're going to show rankings, show a bunch of them so people can see how subjective they are based on their own formulas. They have college overlap information. So, for example, for Virginia Tech, William and Mary is the biggest, then James Madison, then North Carolina State, where my daughter goes, then University of Maryland, then University of Virginia. Those are the big 5 overlaps. What state students come from? And there's more. I don't want to make this recommended resource a 10-minute section, so you're getting the abridged version. And there's also some narrative data, which is I find really helpful. For example, you may remember on the podcast when we talked about how Virginia Tech over-enrolled in 2019. So they talk about how they were expecting 6,600 and they went to 8,000 that enrolled and what they did about that. They talk about the new pathway curriculum that went into effect in 2015. And they talk about how students in the honors colleges are the ones that get the better internships. I personally own this book in both Kindle and paperback. And I only do that for a couple books. So I'm asking you to trust me. Buy it. You will not regret it. I don't get a penny from you buying it. I'm just trying to help. We will now return to my interview with Mark Salisbury from Tuitionfit. I'm really glad you took the time to really explicate that as clearly as you did. I think it's important that people understand your commitment to several things. One, just protecting, the anonymity of the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you even have that step in there of letting the person see what's going to be uploaded and make sure they're comfortable with it. Yep. I think that's fantastic. And I think it was very astute, prudent to make it a free exercise originally. And I think it just clouds things right from the start if there's some transaction fees involved and things. And so I think that was really, really, really brilliant. So let's talk in terms of our listeners. So some of our listeners are thinking, I'm interested in this.
Mm-hmm.
So
wonderful. Join us.
Yeah. And and I will say this, Mark did a demo for me in one of our meetings before this podcast. And I got to see that stuff is blocked out. It's very clearly blocked out. That's one of the things that got me excited about this, was just to see the extent to which you protect privacy, just to visually actually see it. So we've got our listeners and they're like, I'm interested. So if I'm going to go through this process, I've got a student and they're getting in and they're getting different aid awards, and I'm willing to upload them to your system. As long as you're telling me, you're going to block everything out and let me see it so I'm comfortable with it. What am I going to get in exchange for doing that? Can you talk about the access that the person gets?
Sure. So once that student's uploaded or that family's uploaded their award letters, and, let's be honest, it's parents primarily that are doing the uploading because they're the ones that are thinking about the bill.
Yeah.
But once the family has uploaded the award letters and we've gone through the process of redacting, calculating, getting your approval on our redactions, it goes into the system. And as soon as it goes into the system, then you've got free access to come to Tuitionfit and see all of the offers that have been shared with us by students just like yours, meaning students who have a similar EFC, not exact, but similar. So, and what I mean by that is when a student has a really low EFC, the Pell Grant varies as their EFC goes up from 1 to 6,000-ish. And so at the small EFC levels, that similar range is much narrower. Mm-hmm. And then when you get to somebody who has a 30 or a 40,000 EFC, the ranges are much wider because the institutions by and large treat that as basically the same. right?
Yeah.
So if you've got an EFC, it's more than $50,000. And most institutions aren't going to treat you anything differently than if you've got an EFC of $150,000. It's about the same. So you're going to see a whole bunch of offers, usually in the several hundreds to maybe 1,000, 1,200 or so, offers shared by students within the last 3 years, meaning just this current year. So students who are seniors in high school right now who will be starting in the fall, students who are freshmen in college because they started last year, or students who started 2 years ago. You'll see 3 years worth of data. And those students who have shared that you'll see will be similar financial status and similar academic status, so that it's really apples to apples. So if you are a student that uploaded an award letter and your student's got a 30,000 EFC and a 3.5 GPA, you're going to see awards uploaded by students who also had close to a 30,000 EFC and pretty close to a 3.5 GPA. And if they uploaded a test score, we include that in the calculus as well. So now you really know that this is apples to apples, and you're seeing what similar students have been offered. And you'll see everything from community colleges all the way up to Ivy League institutions, assuming that you are in the academic category where there might be Ivy League institutions there, right? But you'll be amazed at the range of prices that students similar to yours are being asked to pay, because that range in almost every case will range from $5,000 to $55,000. Mm-hmm. And you'll start to see institutions that you've never heard of. And you'll see institutions that you'll think, how in the world? I didn't think that institution would give a student like mine a price in that range. And you'll see that in either a very positive way or a very negative way, right? The point is that now you have information, because you'll see the awards that you've uploaded, and you'll see all the comparison stuff below. And you'll see how the awards break down, the sticker price, then the grants and scholarships, any money that's been given that's not, you don't have to pay back if there's a federal loan in there. And then what we call the price to pay now, the price that you're going to be asked to pay on your bill. And then when we have the award letter, and there are some cases that we don't have the award letter, and I'll explain that in a second. When we have the award letter, you can actually click on that and see the anonymized award letter that was uploaded by that similar student, whoever they are.
That's awesome.
And now it's time for our college spotlight of the week.
Friends, I am really excited to bring to you a college spotlight today from Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo. And I need to shout out Keisha from Indiana, because she's the one who sent this in and requested that we do this. And, hadn't been the last time I was at Western Michigan, Lisa, was in the 80s. I was there because, I ran track at Michigan State. So we would go to track meets at all these places. So it was so long, and I haven't had a student go there, and so I was really, really impressed as I really dove into this school. And I have to give you some credit, Lisa, because, you and I were talking beforehand, and I was like, I just don't know how many people are interested in Western Michigan. Maybe we should make this one a little shorter. And you're like, oh, a lot of people are interested in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know there's quite a number of people who go, because they have a good business program and health sciences and some other things. So
exactly. And so I was very, very impressed. So Western Michigan, one thing they like to say is that it is a big school opportunities and small school attention and a small school feel. And that's really what I found as I did a deep dive here. Now, one thing that a lot of times I do in these college spotlights, I have at the very end, I'm like, time for the stats. I'm not going to do it that way this time. I'm just going to kind of intertwine the stats throughout the whole presentation. But, they have 17,000, a little more than 17,000 on the undergrad side, 4,400 on the grad side. So you're talking about a total of 2,100 21,000. That's like a solid mid-sized school, which offers you a lot of choices when it comes to courses and curriculum. But they do a lot of different things just to create that small school feel. And you see it in the friendliness of the student body. And another thing, and we'll get to this more, that I underestimated, and I should know this because, it's in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Kalamazoo is 143 miles from Detroit and 147 miles from Chicago. So it's like smack dab between Chicago and Detroit. And it's really, only less than 70 miles from Lansing, where I lived for 4 years. And so I should know this, but I never realized just kind of how unique Kalamazoo is in terms of a location and how much it offers. And I'll get more into that as we dive in. But I just wanted to say that the combination of the big school resources, the smaller school feel, really making it a awesome mid-sized school, and how much the Kalamazoo area offers, coupled with incredible value on price when I get into cost, it really makes this school appealing. And I really want to thank Keisha because I will definitely be putting this school on a lot more college lists than I had been doing in the past. So just a little bit about it, as a background. And Lisa, I want you to have you ever been there, by the way?
I have been to Kalamazoo, and I believe I've been to Western Michigan because I had my postdoc at Ann Arbor, but I was always commuting back and forth to Chicago. So that was a frequent stopover, stop in Kalamazoo. And it's a very cute town.
So let's just talk a little bit about the school. So I'll start out a little bit with the background. So it's a public research university, obviously in Kalamazoo, Michigan, established in 1903. And it's got an interesting history about it. Like a lot of schools, it's gone through quite an interesting metamorphosis. So, at the time, Governor Aaron Bliss signed a bill authorizing the creation. It was the fourth teacher training school in the state of Michigan. And the other schools, they called them normal schools back then. And the other schools are schools I know well as well from just being on their campuses back in the 80s and even in the early 90s. But Eastern Michigan, which is in Ypsilanti, Central Michigan, Mount Pleasant, and Northern Michigan and Marquette. So it was originally known as Western State Normal School. And it was a 2-year training program that people would go through. And the school renamed itself several times. It became Western State Teachers College in 1927. Then it became Michigan College of Education in 1941. Then it became Western Michigan College in 1955. And then finally in 1957, a bill went into effect making it, Western Michigan University. Now the school more recently has been hit pretty hard by COVID. So they estimate that COVID cost the school $45 million. And they've had to have salary freezes and, salary had to take a 5 to 10% pay cut. And more recently, enrollment has been down between 4 to 5%. Believe it or not, that's less than average for regional public universities across the country. But I still see this a very, very, very healthy school with a tremendous amount of pride and school spirit. There's a lot of pride about this school. So the school's got different campus locations. It's got the West Campus, the East Campus, the Oakland Drive Campus, the Parkview Campus, and then it has a College of Aviation. And the West Campus is the one that people will think of as kind of the main campus. In fact, that's kind of what students refer to it as. And that's where most of your academic and your administrative buildings are, on the campus. And by the way, I'm going to stop saying Western Michigan because everybody there just says WMU, It's just WMU. Is that what they call it in Chicago? Because that's what all the students call it there.
Yeah.
I think Western is faster, but I guess there's lots of Westerns out there, So I like to respect schools by what they like to go by. And so, WMU is what they go by. WMU is what it will be. I do think that College of Aviation is one thing that they have that's very unique and distinct.
Yeah, that's really cool.
You knew about that?
Yes.
Yeah, they have 950 students, they go there for aviation. And that part has been growing, by the way. Demand has been off the charts for that. In fact, they've opened a satellite campus in Florida with additional facilities that they're continuing to build out for training, just because of how much it's grown. That satellite campus is pretty much dedicated to aviation and to some music therapy programs that they have. But here's a little known fun fact. Western Michigan is one of 70 schools in the country. So that's not a lot. You figure there's 50 states, right? It's one of 70 schools in the country that has both a law school and a med school. So they've got all that. Now, in addition to the main Kalamazoo campus and those different locations sort of within Kalamazoo, they also do have regional campuses throughout the state of Michigan that have around 6,000 students at them. So they have one in Battle Creek, they have one in Benton Harbor, they have one in Grand Rapids, and they do have one in Metro Detroit. So, they've got their footprint kind of spread throughout the state. Those campuses are not as residential as the Kalamazoo campus, but it's important to know that you could see Western Michigan located in those different locations there. Now, just a little bit more about some basic things. Their motto is so that all may learn. That's their motto, so that all may learn. And their nickname athletically is the Broncos. And they play in a conference called the MAC, which is the Mid-American Conference, but everybody just calls it the MAC. And their colors are brown and gold. And so there's a lot of pride about the brown and gold. There's a lot of school spirit, centered around the brown and gold. Their academic programming is divided up into 7 different programs that they offer, or 7 different schools. And so those are really important to understand. And those 7 schools are College of Arts and Sciences, the College of Aviation, the Haworth College of Business, the College of Education, the College of Engineering and Applied Sciences, the College of Fine Arts, the College of Health and Human Services, and then of course they do have the Lee Honors College, which is their honors college, in addition, of course, to the graduate programs. And so, just a little bit more about student life. There are 23 residence halls, and they do have a lot of special interest residence halls. I really like that. So, you've got special interest halls for aviation, business, engineering, sciences, fine arts, health and human services, transfer students. They have a wellness house. They're really big on that. They also have a free bus shuttle that gets you all around Kalamazoo, and it's called the Bronco Shuttle, which is pretty cool. Their athletic rival is Central Michigan. The Chippewas, they're known by. So that's their big athletic rival, and they've produced a lot of famous alums. So you're the person that follows acting and all that, so you may know these people: Tim Allen, Bruce Campbell, Terry Crews. You know any of those people, Lisa?
I think Tim Allen I am familiar with.
Yeah, he's the only one I knew.
Campbell, yeah. And maybe yeah. Bruce Crews, I'm not up on that one. Sorry.
Bruce Campbell, Terry Crews.
So sorry.
you just proved that you're not familiar.
Fine gentlemen. I apologize. I'm going to look you up after this whole thing. I'm going to find you on Google. I promise.
There you go. There's 2 others. Homer Stryker. So Homer is the founder of the Fortune 500 company Stryker Corporation, which is a well-known medical company. So that's a famous person, and one of my absolute all-time favorite singers. We play his music all the time. It was devastating to me when he died. Luther Vandross.
Oh, yes. I have heard of Luther Vandross.
You better. I'm going to treat you the way you and Dave treat me
in the 80s. You know what I'm saying? So there's no way I could not know that name. So.
Yeah, I'm like, you better, because I'm going to treat you the way you and Dave treat me on movies if you don't know Luther.
No. He's the king of the ballad.
Yes, Luther is the man. So let's look at some stats. I'm going to throw a bunch of stats out at you, and I think you'll get a sense of the school from the stats, and then we'll talk about some other things. So the transfer admission application data is kind of similar to the overall admission data. So they accept 76.5% of transfer students. They have a very high yield, 55.4%, and they're 50-50 by gender. 89% of transfers come from Michigan, with 27.6% multicultural population. The biggest difference between that and their freshman admission data is freshman admissions are not as much Michigan as transfer. So it's more like 3/4 of people come from Michigan, where 75 come from Michigan for transfer data. And you do have two different options when it comes to the application. You have the Western Michigan application. They have their own application where you apply directly on there, or they are on the Common App. Now, for transfers, they don't have the Common App. They used to, but they just have their own direct Bronco application. So that's kind of how that works. Like I said, big school opportunity, small school attention, small school feel. They have a number of unique things. I mentioned the LLCs. They actually have 16 living learning communities altogether. And they have other support things that give it the small school feels. For example, they have the Bronco Study Zone. They have the Writing Center. They have a really cool program called Supplemental Instruction. And the way this works is a student takes a course, then they take the same course again. I'm like, why are you taking it again? Well, the second time they take it, they create supplemental materials, and they work to be a liaison with the faculty, and they provide resources to help current students. It's a program that they actually have won many, many awards for.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty creative.
Yeah, talk about really getting mastery. That would be
Yeah. And then it's all designed to help students. In a recent survey, 90% of students said that they have a mentor on campus. And I think that's high for a school, like a mid-sized school like that, for 9 and 10 people to say they have a campus mentor.
Absolutely.
They're one of the top 10 producers of Fulbright scholars amongst their faculty. Another thing is it's very, very environmentally responsive college, and they've been recognized a lot of ways for their commitment to the environment. They've been acknowledged as one of the most eco-friendly colleges by several people, and they've also, received other awards as well in that regard. In fact, there was a huge controversy in 2007 where the students were out picketing and campaigning and protesting because they felt the school was not eco-friendly enough. Now, another thing to know is like Kalamazoo has a budding arts culture, so it's kind of a place for creatives. And so there's art festivals there. In fact, it's been acknowledged as one of the top 3 places for creatives. And so if you like an arts festival scene, they've got that. They've got a nature preserve scenes. They have lots of locally owned cafes. And they've really done a good job cultivating a relationship with the business community. So, when it comes to internships, externships, things like that, they've really, really kind of got that down. I started talking about their application a bit before and I got sidetracked. Let me resume some of the stuff I want to say there. So I mentioned you can apply through the Common App or what they call the Gold Gateway, which is the exact same application. It's just only on Western Michigan's website. Exact same, like nothing different. So they're going to ask for official transcripts, and they're going to ask for an app fee, of course, obviously. They have decided to go SAT or ACT optional, but you should be aware that high test scores are required for their most generous scholarships. And so it's a pretty basic application. You could say they want official transcripts and an app fee and fill out the information, but they like you to do an essay. They like you to do the Western Michigan supplemental essay, and they like resumes. So they don't require them, but they absolutely read them. And so it's a fascinating model. Like they'll admit just off numbers if that's what you submit. So they kind of ask for a bare minimum, but they do use your admission application automatically as your scholarship application. And they're going to look at, your resume and your extracurriculars and your essays, and all those things will be factored in for scholarship. So just do the whole thing. I know why schools do that because they get more applications, but it's just worth it to put the time in and to get one's potential scholarship money. And they are going to read it. Like there are schools that ask for that stuff and they hardly read it. This is a school that really reads it. Now, when I say they're a bargain, let's talk a little bit about their cost. They have one of the smallest differences I've ever seen, Lisa, between in-state and out-of-state.
I was going to ask you about that because I think like if I was in-state, that would irritate me a little bit.
Yeah, so let's talk about this because our listeners may not know what you're talking about. So, if you are an in-state student, you're going to pay around $13,000 for tuition. If you're an out-of-state student, you're going to pay about $16,000 for tuition. That's tuition and fees. That's only a $3,000 difference. In Georgia, it's triple. It's like 10,000 in-state, 30,000 out-of-state. And most schools are usually like 2.5 to 3 times is more the norm. So there's almost no punishment for you being an out-of-state student. I agree with you. If I'm in-state and I'm paying taxes, that's probably going to bother me too. But it's more of a problem when you're at a selective place and I'm being bumped out because of these out-of-state kids, right? So it's more of a problem at a Michigan or a UC's or Virginia, Texas, or North Carolina. They still are able to accommodate most of the students that apply. So financially, their room and board is around 11. Their books and supplies a little over 1,000. So you're looking at 25,000 all in as an in-state student and 28,000 all in as an out-of-state student. That is really low. On top of that, they have some scholarships that you automatically qualify for. The most generous one is the medallion one. That's 16,000 over 4 years. If you get the medallion, you're basically paying 12,000 all in. All in. And they, what they do for the medallion is they take the top 60 applicants that apply and they do a scholarship day thing where they invite you to come in for interviews. And they are really looking there at, they're really looking at your essays, your extracurriculars, and they are looking at test scores for the medallion. You do need to be admitted into their honors college, their Lee Honors College. But the Lee Honors College has a 3.6 GPA requirement. It's not super high. And so literally this could be a school that could cost you $12,000 other than transportation. Let's say by the time you throw in transportation and personal miscellaneous spending money, you could be looking at, well, if you got the medallion, maybe you're looking at, depends how far you're coming transportation, but maybe 16 or 17,000, and then you say, well, only 20 people get the medallion. Like I may not get that. Well, they have something called the Bronco Merit, which is 2,500. And then they have Bronco Honors, which is like 2,250. So, now, Lisa, you hit on the top majors earlier. Like their strongest programs really are in business and health sciences. They really are. So now they have a really strong interdisciplinary studies program. And obviously they have the aviation program. And they have great exploratory program for people who don't know what they want to major in yet. But the really strong majors are things like nursing, finance, accounting, biomedical sciences, healthcare administration. I've been talking a long time. I just want to take a breath and see what you want to say.
Oh, well, I think that it sounds like a really good bang for the buck. It seems very affordable. And I know that's one reason why a lot of people from Illinois will consider it. It's cheaper than going to, a state school in Illinois many times. So I think that's really good. And I think that, from what I could see, that people who are in those highly ranked programs have really good placement for jobs or, medical school, if that's their path. So they seem to be pretty successful at those programs.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about their location. So they are a 30-minute walk straight down a hill, right into the downtown Kalamazoo. 5 minutes.
It's great getting there. It's hard getting back, though.
Yeah, getting back, they pretty much will say, get an Uber. Or, of course, you can use the free bus system. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing that, when I talked about their location being great, part of it, Metro Kalamazoo has 300,000 people, so it's not really small. And so partly I was really impressed as I did my research on their connections to the city and the internships and externships that they have. But I was also impressed with the fact that, you have water 6 miles away. If you're a water person, you're not that far. There's beach there. Not that far from a lot of different things as far as nature. Now, if you're a hockey person, it's a huge hockey sport.
Yes, it's all
hockey
about the
school. Hockey. Yeah. In fact, the hockey doesn't even play in the Mid-American Conference. It's too good for that. It plays in a much higher level conference. Kalamazoo also has a small little airport, so that you can get in there. I've already mentioned the free buses for students. By the way, the free buses for students, that was an initiative that was led by some students at Western Michigan who petitioned and got the city to provide free buses for students. I think that's pretty cool. And as far as diversity, it's a good school, and it's got a lot of, it's not an homogenous school. It's got a mixture of different kinds of kids. And so, for example, 30% of kids are Pell. So that's Pell recipients. That means there's a lot of socioeconomic diversity right there. That's not too far off the national averages, which are like 39%. And 67% white, 10.2% black, 6.8% Latino, 3.5% biracial, 2.7% Asian. So, it's around a third non-white, 2/3 white, with a lot of socioeconomic diversity. Now, if you're coming from California, that won't feel racially diverse. But compared to an Iowa or Wisconsin or Vermont or Maine, that is racially diverse. And it doesn't have a pretentious feeling at all. And it definitely has sort of there's a pride there. There's a pride at this school that I think really would be impressive to applicants.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it for Western Michigan. I was going to call you Anika after all this time. You'd think I'd have my act together.
It's okay. I still find it a compliment.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. Glad you're not throwing a pan through the podcast system and hit me in the face.
Can I do that? No, just kidding. Is that possible? I had no idea that was an option for me.
Hey, I would have been knocked out in the debate if that was the case.
That's right.
You would have just decked me.
Like things from my office just flying through the computer. Oh no, that's
the way this world is. Somebody might invent it. Who knows?
It's entirely possible. Yeah, I think kids that I know who've gone there for the programs, but also the sports. I think it's kind of known as a very social school. Mm-hmm. And you see in the rankings that that some people consider it a good party school. Although I will say it is only the 4th best party school in Michigan. So if it's not the partiest school there, and I think what I did just a quick Google search of the news this afternoon on Western Michigan. So 3 things came up. One is, just like COVID related things. 2 was that there's a scandal on the campus about a high profile athlete and, a sexual assault case, which I think is unfortunate, but not uncommon. And the 3rd thing was that they had gotten, I think, $500 million, and that they were able to use this to give more financial aid to students. So I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. That was a pretty national newsworthy story when that broke. That was a huge national story. It was actually $550 million. It was $200 million for the Stryker Medical School, $300 million for financial aid, and $50 million for athletic improvements. So it was a really big deal. In fact, it was the biggest single gift ever to a public university, not to a flagship school, but to a regional public, WMU. There's something else that I should have mentioned. They've got a pretty good program called WES, and that's just an acronym for Western Michigan Essential Studies. It's their combination of their gen ed and their intellectual skills that employers seek. And so it's really a program designed to produce critical thinkers, complex problem solvers, emotional intelligence, judgment and decision-making, and creativity. And they've also been named one of the 5 best U.S. campuses for electric cars. So like I said, they're really into the environmental thing. That's a huge thing for them. I was reading about that protest that broke out in 2007. That just would not have broken out at a lot of schools. They're considered to have the most extensive electric vehicle infrastructure of any college.
That's fantastic.
And so you want a super affordable, eco-friendly school that's mid-size and they do a lot of things to make it small and homey, whether it's the living learning communities or all the other things that we talked about. And cost is a huge factor for you. This could be a really good option. And like you said, you've got lakes there, you've got downtown there, you've got shopping. I will say this. It is not for weather weenies. It is not for the faint of heart.
That wind whips off the lake.
Yes.
Folks. And the lake effect snow, it's real. It's a real thing.
Yeah, you got to be able to handle that. You got to be able to handle the real deal.
Yeah.
But thank you, Keisha. We got another college spotlight in the books. Felt like it'd been a while since we've done one. Other than the like admissions officers talking
Right,
about their own
yeah.
school, that
Yeah, I
version.
just wanted one quick thing to add.
Sure.
Is that, like, if you're a B plus student, this is another great school to consider.
Well, not even
You know,
just B plus. You can be a B student and even some
right.
BC students. So, you don't need to be B plus. Like you can be B or BC and still, be a real competitive applicant. Their acceptance rate is 84.9%. Now, after I finished the recording with Lisa, I looked up some more data to see the range of students they can take. 37% of students submitted test scores, so only about 1 in 3. But 41.5% had an ACT between 18 and 23. 11.3% had an ACT between 12 and 17. And 21.1% had an SAT between 800 and 1,000. 25.5% were in the bottom half of their class. 3.4% were in the bottom quarter of their class. So I said to Lisa they could take a BC student, but you really can be a CB student. And this is a school where you have a really good chance of admission.
Yeah, and find a great place to go to school.
Yeah, and that's important. I'm glad you said that, because we're always looking for those gems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important that people know that, well, what if I don't have $50,000? Like I definitely don't have 80, but I don't have 50. And I want to say one thing on this and I'll call it a day. So I believe students can, the whole financial model assumes joint responsibility between students and parents. Students can take out a $6,000 federal loan. They can make $3,000 working through the school year. They can make $2,000 over the summer toward their education. And most students, if they really get out and get serious about it, they can win $2,000 to $3,000 in scholarships. If a student does all that, they're bringing half the money to the table.
Right.
And, so now let's say a family's like, I just don't have any money. Well, if you as a parent could get to the $15,000 price point and your child can do the other half, through what I mentioned, some loans, some school year work, some summer work, and small scholarships, you could attend this school, on without it really, infringing on your finances that much. And so
Right.
I think for people for whom finances are a massive factor, this is a place that you can look and you don't have to be in the state of Michigan for it.
No, you're absolutely right. And I follow, I think it's Paying for College 101 on Facebook. And so many people are saying, oh, my kid got accepted to this school and I got the financial aid package and it's completely unaffordable to us. And we're shocked and I don't know what to do. And, that's like a terrible position to be in, but also probably a mostly avoidable position to be in. So like with some planning and some research, even if you don't have a whole bunch of money in the bank, you can still find great places for your student to attend. And this is one of those examples.
That's a drop the mic moment. That's the final word. Thanks, Lisa.
Next week in the news, UC Berkeley must slash new enrollment by 1/3 unless High Court intervenes, by Francis Nickelspiel of Berkeley Side. Our question from a listener is 40 things Mark thinks would surprise listeners if you were to work in college admissions. That will be part 1 of 2. Our interview is with Tuitionfit.org founder Mark Salisbury, who explains what Tuitionfit is, why he started Tuitionfit, and how it can help families. That will be the final part 3 of 3. And our college spotlight comes to you from Ohio. It is the College of Wooster in Wooster, Ohio.
By the way, Lisa's already saying part 2 on the 40 things. Come on, Mark, who's kidding who? That's a 3-parter. You know how much you talk. And we're recording part of it tonight. So we'll see. Most of the time when she makes those predictions, she's right, but I'm kind of determined to see if I can make her be wrong this time.
40 is a lot of time. I'm thinking it's a 4-parter, but that's
no,
okay.
It's not a 4-parter because we have too many questions from listeners. The plan is just to hit something, quick and fast and get some commentary on Lisa, but I can yak it up, so I'm sure we'll probably go a little longer on that one, but I'm excited about that. So hopefully you guys tune into that. I've been working on it for a couple months now, and I've just been thinking through what are the things where's the gap between the reality and the perception. So we'll have some fun with it. Well, my friend, get some sleep.
I sure will.
All right. See you next week, my friend. All right.
See you next week.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe so you get every episode as soon as it is released. If you are interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. And you can write a review for us on your favorite podcast listening app. I am the producer of the Your College Bound Kid podcast. We have a fantastic team of 9 people. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. David Williams and Dr. Lisa Ruff. Our sound engineer who fixes all of our many errors is Nemanja Motvich. The amazing music you hear is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Dalianas Dimitri. If you want to have a college coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want to ask, or a college you want Lisa or me to do a spotlight on, or if you have a recommended resource or an article you think we should share, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you, our family, next week.